While looking for books I could potentially read, I came across this article that was raving about how amazing this LGBT book was. This book in question is called The Tribulations of Ross Young, Supernat PA. Unlike my previous video, this one's going to be actually quite short. Prose. It's really refreshing to read something that's more akin to an episodic storytelling instead of the typical chapter-by-chapter serialization that you would see in most novels. However, that's kind of where the prose start and end, other than the fact that Ross as a main character is likable enough. I personally like him, but that's probably because he's the only character that's actually characterized enough to feel like a fleshed out character comparatively to everyone else, but we'll get to that. Subjective. It's extremely fanficky. Not only does Amazon have a little warning sign that says, hey, there's a lot of typos in here, but it's not really the typos that bother me, it's just the vibe of it all is extremely fanficky, which, to the author's credit, they did kind of give that warning because they described it kind of a crack story, which is something you would expect from fanfiction. It's also listed as a romance novel, so you would expect that the romance would be more characterized, but the chemistry is just, you're hot, let's fuck, and date, which I'm not opposed to that kind of storytelling because it's actually extremely realistic on how a lot of relationships starts and maybe end. However, the love interest, Glenn, feels extremely flat compared to Ross because he's literally only described as, oh, he's a hot vampire, he's hot, oh my god, he's hot, like literally. And it's just not enjoyable to read a very flat characterization romance story, but other people may like it. Cons. Oh boy. So what kind of caught me off guard is that there is a concerning portrayal of all non-American beings being characterized by either their accent or some kind of racial stereotype. And as someone who is multiracial, this bugs me. Now, I do want to make this clear. I am not saying that the author is racist, but I do think they are ignorant. So, for example, there is a Japanese character who's been living in America for who knows how long, but of course, he has to use honorifics in every sentence despite the fact that he is speaking English. That gives off the hint that it might be implied English, but I would have to go back to double check and I don't want to. There is a character named Rocco who in every single sentence he has to start it with ja. There is a Latina bruja who isn't described or characterized by an accent, but I'm pretty sure she was kind of characterized of fiery Latina stereotype, which can be harmful. There is, I forgot if it was Irish or Scottish, and I'm so sorry about that, but there was a group of werewolves who were one of the two, and they are definitely characterized by drinking, alcohol consumption. Now, the werewolves were actually better characterized because there were a few chapters or one chapter really dedicated to them. So they did actually ended up getting fleshed out. But basically, all of the non-white characters, with the exception of the main character Ross, were not fleshed out at all. So when the author introduced this new character that was characterized by an accent or a racial stereotype, it felt like a token minority, where it's like, look at me, quirky, racial, and then a few pages later, they don't matter anymore because they're not part of the story anymore and they never appear again. So, from a reader's perspective, it's concerning. However, the reason why I'm suggesting ignorance over racism is because most of the characters are not fleshed out, including a bunch of other side white characters that does little to the plot. Most of the characters are just have zero characterization, and while to an extent that's okay because a lot of them are side background characters to kind of make the space feel more lively, because the main focus or the main characters were supposed to be Ross and his love interest. But like I mentioned earlier, his love interest was extremely flat. There was like barely any characterization of him other than Glenn is clearly attracted to Ross and Ross is also attracted to him, and Glenn is supposedly the perfect vampire boyfriend who's hot. And like that's it. So yeah, 2 out of 7. I'm pretty sure someone else out there likes this book, considering that I found this book on a article listing. But I'm not one of them. Take whatever I say with a grain of salt. Read it if you want to, or don't.